Now, my question is, does the growing scale of the fuel deliveries indicate deepening trust between the two or simply achieving economic goals?
Well, I think, first of all, yes, there are economic goals in between both countries. So Azerbaijan is selling more fuel, so we're getting more revenue. Armenia is getting fuel at a lower cost. We see Georgia also in the process by decreasing the transit fees. But I think the main idea here is that by increasing the fuel shipments, we're also building consistency. So there's increasing energy trade. So there's reliability on both ends that could actually move. And I think that's the main idea behind it, to build trust between the two countries.
Right, so this is actually helping to build trust between them. Like, this is like the step to making sure that that trust solidifies, would you say?
Yes, and also adding that consistency, it also adds an element of dependency between the two countries. So Armenia has been facing a lot of increased inflation in fuel prices. So what better way to mend ties and look to the future than helping each other, in that context.
Yes, it's definitely a change that these two countries are coming together to work together in regards to building up both of their economic goals and priorities. Now, how strategically significant then is diesel as a backbone fuel for industry and transport compared to earlier gasoline shipments?
That's really interesting, actually. When we look at the difference between gasoline and diesel, so gasoline is usually for consumers, individuals, cars, but diesel is really the backbone of industry, agriculture, heavy industry. So it shows that Azerbaijan is ready and willing to help in Armenia in diversifying its fuel sources for its industry. So it's a step forward. It's not just for the public, but it's for the industry itself. So it carries a really big strategic significance in that sense.
Yes, and I guess with that, as you mentioned, diesel being more of that lucrative kind of format of energy, the implications for that for both countries in the next, 4 to 5 years, where would that go? Could we see more increase between deliveries?
In terms of fuel, I think this is all of this is well thought out and well planned between the two countries to increase the normalization process. So I think everyone is aware of that. But I think it all has to go step by step. So public view of the situation is really important. How they approach the situation is really important. So yes, the energy trade is increasing. It has benefits for both Armenia and Azerbaijan. But the main effect here is for the public to understand that they're both benefiting from this. So in that light, I think, yes, in the next coming days, months, and years, that this will intensify, and hopefully it will intensify, because that entails that there will be some sort of strategic interconnectedness between the countries. That usually it does happen between neighboring countries, but we've lacked because of the conflict.
Yes, and the war, and now coming together, binding that with transit, with fuel deliveries, is helping to kind of, as you mentioned, build trust and also grow the economy. My next question is, does reliance then on transit through Georgia represent a temporary workaround or a durable model for regional integration?
I think taking into consideration the current sensitivities and the realities, Georgia has always been one of the facilitators in the region. So they've always been helpful to both Azerbaijan and Armenia in the normalization process, or attempting at least in the past. But right now, for the scale of shipments and the deliveries, I think for direct shipments, there has to be large investment into infrastructure. So to railways, to roads that need to be reconstructed. So I think Georgia already has that infrastructure. It acts as a base. It shows how this transport, basically it shows the outcome. So something's leaving from Baku, from Azerbaijan, and it's going to Yerevan. And the effect is what's important right now. Once the public sees the effect, the government see the effect, I think that will be more of a way to entice the governments to actually build connectivity.
So would you say then that is a pilot scheme to see whether or not, okay, if this works, we can build on that, would you say?
Definitely. I think, yeah, they're trying to show the benefits of this trade, and it would act as a precursor to, for example, TRIP. So direct contact between Azerbaijan and Armenia through trade and logistics.
Yes, which I will get to later on, because TRIP is a very big deal, especially for the region. Now, at what point does recurring trade become economically and politically costly to reverse?
I think once we're looking at the trade that's been going on, so the volume of trade has been steadily increasing. So once it reaches a threshold where, for example, from this light, from yesterday's trade, we can see once we see that the Armenian public has that effect of, our oil prices are going down, we see it on industry, we see it on the products that we buy, that's affected by heavy industry. It really doesn't leave much room for reignition of conflict. So in the public domain, I think this is the biggest idea of showing people that, look, we're building on peace, we're learning how to live in peace, and this is the effect of it. So the elements within the society that would want the conflict to reignite, they don't really have that much arguments for it, other than the fact that it would cause more destruction, loss of lives, and then they would have a counter argument saying, look, we're already benefiting from the peace, economically, livelihood, all of this.
Yeah, it's having much more of a higher benefit to both, to both countries and to the region overall. So it's proving that it's much more better than it is than taking it away. Okay, then, so if your trade proves sustainable, what sector might logically follow as the next kind of test of economic cooperation?
I think when we look at the dynamics in the region, right? So Azerbaijan is an oil exporting, natural gas exporting country. So when we look at Armenia, we have to look at their economic sector. What do they have to offer? But not just Armenia. So it has to be from both sides. So I think agriculture is one of the main things. I think that would be one of the steps forward. So not right now. I think maybe moving into electricity would be logical. But then agriculture also has that, I think, that added benefit of symbolism, right? So if you have food on your table from someone you've reconciled with, made peace with, and it really carries that symbolic effect. Like when you put fuel in your car, you don't really know which fuel it is. But when you have a product, a finished product from one country to the other, it really solidifies, it acts as a symbol of that peace. So I think agriculture is one of the ways that could develop, and electricity as well.
Okay, that's really interesting, and I guess with agriculture from both sides, it can further build sustainable growth and trust between the two. So are these shipments reshaping the regional order then, or merely operating within its existing constraints?
Well, if we say that it's operating within its existing constraints, we have to say that what's been happening in the past is also continuing, but it's not. So we see that bilateral trade is happening, and this is something that hasn't happened for the past few decades. So yes, there is changes within the system, especially in the region system. I wouldn't say that it's completely shifted. So our neighbors are still our neighbors, they're still there. We saw that in one of these shipments that Russian products actually went to Armenia through Azerbaijan. So it shows that, for example, neighbors like Russia, they still want to be involved in the region. They don't want to be left out. They are trying to fit into the new normal. So look into that dynamic and see where they can act in it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a whole systemic shift. But I think also there is an element of both countries coming together in unity and saying that we want to determine our own fate, right? We want to say what our future will be like. So that's a big shift in that sense.
Yes, and just to press on that now, seeing as you mentioned the new normal, are there any hindrances or obstacles to that? You mentioned actors like Russia still trying to be a part of it in some way, shape or form. We know that their influence was very heavy over the past, 10, 15 years, and now that's really lacking, that we've seen with the Trump route to prosperity and the US involvement. But are there any obstacles to this kind of new normal?
I think right now, at least, other than some local elements that might not want to reconcile due to historic grievances within both countries, I think the biggest obstacle right now are the regional neighbors, right? So like I mentioned, Russia, but then the biggest obstacle in terms of trip is Iran. So how open is Iran to having its border basically delimited by this route? Historically, that's where Iran has always had shipments to Armenia. But I think that's kind of out of our scope. So because Iran has its own issues with the US, I think it already has a lot on its plate. But regardless of the fact, I think Iran also understands that there's a new normal going on, that internationally, no one can really go out and say that I'm against peace. So no one morally should say that there shouldn't be peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So even though they might have that kind of rhetoric within themselves, basically, they have to act according to international law. And if there's a peace agreement that's on the way, they have to, adapt to it.
No, definitely, and it's very interesting because we did speak to one of my colleagues spoke to the Iran minister in relation to that and what they thought about the Zangezur corridor, and they were very diplomatic in their responses due to that. But just focusing now on the trip route and the US's involvement in all of this, how much of that has actually played a big part in bringing not only the two sides together, but kind of forwarding what this new normal looks like and growth within trade, within trust relations between these two countries?
I think the US being involved as an actor had a really significant role. So I think even the confidence building measures starting with trade, with economic benefits, it kind of has that air of US pragmatism, rationalism that, look, why make war when we can make money? So it's kind of like Trump's motto, I think, in that sense of looking at solving conflicts, that we can have a rational outlook. Obviously, that's not the case all the time. We see that people don't really act rationally, and they can get involved in their emotions and, in grievances at least. But I think the US played a really important role, and it still continues to play a really important role. Vice President J.D. Vance visited the region. It was a really significant visit, especially to both countries. It was cooperative. There was charters signed between both of them with the US. So I think if the US continues on this route, that really they can be a part of this peace deal. But I also hope that even if they don't, Azerbaijan and Armenia sees that peace is the only way forward.
Yes,